I should have known something was wrong when Admiral Korath's tentacles started twitching.
In
my 47 cycles serving the Galactic Defense Academy, I had never seen our esteemed Vorthan commander show even the slightest crack in his composure. Yet here he was, his bioluminescent patches flickering like a malfunctioning console, staring at the tactical display with what I can only describe as existential dread. "Professor Velix," he said, his voice carrying that peculiar warble that indicated extreme stress in his species, "are you absolutely certain these humans understand the parameters of the simulation?" I adjusted my sensory array and double-checked the data streams flowing from the simulation chamber. The Thornax war scenario had been running continuously for the past decade, serving as the ultimate test for military strategists across the galaxy. It was a perfect recreation of the bloodiest conflict in recorded history, where the insectoid Thornax collective had nearly wiped out 3 entire star systems before being contained. The simulation required careful resource management, diplomatic negotiations with 14 different species, and complex multi-front warfare spanning 37 worlds. The average completion time for experienced military commanders was 8 months. The record, held by a brilliant Zalani tactician, was 4 months and 3 days. Most cadets never finished at all. These humans had been inside for exactly 57 minutes. According to their academic files, they should be familiar with standard galactic warfare protocols, I replied, though my confidence was wavering faster than a Quellian's mood in a thunderstorm. Captain Maya Torres completed her thesis on asymmetric warfare. Lieutenant Jake Morrison graduated top of his class in tactical systems, and Sergeant Aria Voss. I paused, rechecking the data. Well, her psychological profile is rather interesting. Interesting how? Korath demanded, his main eye swiveling toward me while his peripheral eyes remained glued to the tactical display. She scored off the charts in creative problem-solving and unconventional thinking. Also, she may have set a small fire in the academy cafeteria last month because she was testing the sprinkler response time. Korath's tentacles went perfectly still, in Vorthan body language. This was equivalent to a human going pale and breaking into a cold sweat. On the display, the human cadets were doing something that defied every principle of military science I had learned in my long career. Instead of establishing a defensive perimeter on the border worlds as protocol dictated, they had somehow convinced the normally xenophobic Grix Republic to not only allow human ships through their territory, but to provide escort services. This alone should have taken months of delicate negotiations. Torres had apparently walked into the Grix High Command and said, "Look, you hate the Thornax because they keep trying to eat your colonies, right? We hate them because they exist, and we find that personally offensive. Let's team up and make them extinct." The Grix, who had spent the last 50 years maintaining strict neutrality, had agreed in less than 20 minutes. "How is that even possible?" I muttered, my secondary brain working overtime to process what I was witnessing. "Humans have this peculiar trait," Admiral Korath said slowly, his voice taking on the tone of someone explaining a natural disaster to survivors. "They do not seem to understand the concept of impossible." Meanwhile, Morrison was revolutionizing logistics in ways that made my engineering degree feel utterly worthless. Standard protocol called for supply lines to be established using the safest routes, even if they took longer. Morrison had taken one look at the star charts, laughed and declared, "Safe is slow. Slow gets you killed. Let's take the highway through hell." He was somehow routing supply convoys directly through the Maelstrom Nebula, a region of space so dangerous that most species had classified it as permanently off-limits. The nebula was filled with gravitational anomalies, radiation storms, and space-time distortions that could turn a starship inside out. Morrison's solution? If we can't go around the monsters under the bed, we go through them so fast they don't have time to notice us. His supply ships were making runs through the nebula in 3 days instead of the usual 3 weeks around it. When questioned about casualties, he had shrugged and said, "You can't make an omelet without cracking a few eggs. Good thing we brought extra eggs." But it was Voss who was truly terrifying me. While her colleagues handled diplomacy and logistics, she had taken personal command of the actual military operations. Her approach to the Thornax threat could only be described as aggressively unhinged. Standard doctrine called for careful probing attacks, gathering intelligence, and gradually wearing down enemy positions. Voss had apparently decided that standard doctrine was for species who enjoyed prolonged suffering. Instead of attacking the Thornax border positions, she had studied their expansion patterns and declared, "These bugs are like any other infestation. You don't waste time with the ones you can see. You find the nest, and you burn it all down. She was currently leading a combined fleet of humans, Grix, and 3 other species I hadn't even known were involved, straight toward the Thornax home system. Her battle plan, insofar as it could be called a plan, seemed to consist entirely of the phrase, attack everything that moves, and if it stops moving, attack it again to be sure. Sir, my assistant Zeph chirped from his monitoring station, his scales flushing bright orange with excitement. The humans have just eliminated the Thornax 3rd Fleet. How many ships? Korath asked wearily. All of them, sir. The entire fleet. 237 vessels. The battle lasted 14 minutes. I felt my respiratory sacs deflate. The 3rd Fleet was supposed to be the climactic boss battle of the simulation. Previous cadets had spent months preparing for that encounter. Gathering allies, building specialized weapons, developing complex strategies. Thus had apparently flown straight at them while broadcasting on all frequencies. Come at me, space bugs. I've had worse odds at a family reunion. The tactical recording showed the human fleet charging into the middle of the Thornax formation like a pack of rabid void sharks. Instead of maintaining formation and engaging in orderly combat, they had scattered in all directions, each ship seemingly operating independently while somehow maintaining perfect coordination. It was like watching a dance of destruction, choreographed by someone who had studied ballet by setting the studio on fire and seeing what survived. How are they coordinating their attacks? I asked, frantically analyzing the data streams. They're not using standard tactical networks, and their communication frequencies are filled with what appears to be recreational chatter. Torres to Morrison came a voice from the audio feed. I've got 6 bugs on my tail and I'm running low on missiles. Copy that, Maya. Jake here. I'm sending you a care package via express delivery. Express delivery turned out to be Morrison ramming his supply ship directly through the center of the pursuing Thornax formation while ejecting every piece of ordnance in his cargo hold. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. Did he just, Horath, began. Yes, sir. He used a supply vessel as a kinetic weapon while simultaneously providing ammunition resupply and tactical support. And he survived? Not only survived, sir. His ship is somehow in better condition than when he started. I'm not entirely sure how that's physically possible. Voss's voice crackled over the comm, cheerful and completely unhinged. Nice fireworks, Jake. Aria here. I'm about to try something really stupid. If this works, we'll be heroes. If it doesn't work, we'll be very attractive. Vapor clouds. What is she planning? Korath whispered, and I realized his question was directed more at the universe in general than at me specifically. The Vorthak Resumation botted. The answer came in the form of Voss, diving her entire battle group directly into the gravity well of a neutron star, using the intense gravitational field to slingshot around and attack the Thornax homeworld from an angle that had previously been considered mathematically impossible. She's using stellar mechanics as a tactical weapon, I said, my voice climbing several octaves. She's weaponizing physics itself. The Thornax defenders, who had been positioned to repel attacks from normal space, suddenly found themselves facing an assault force that appeared to be falling out of the sky at relativistic speeds while screaming what sounded like ancient human war songs. Is that? Are they singing? Seth asked, his crest feathers standing on end. Indeed they were. The entire human fleet was broadcasting some sort of rhythmic chanting that seemed to synchronize their weapons fire. Every beat of their war song corresponded to another Thornax ship exploding in brilliant flowers of plasma and debris. Admiral Korath slowly turned to face me, his expression conveying the existential weight of someone who had just watched everything they thought they knew about warfare get fed into a shredder and set on fire. Professor Velix, he said carefully, in your professional opinion, what exactly are we dealing with here? I looked at the tactical display, where the humans had just eliminated the Thornax homeworld defenses, and were now apparently having an argument about whether to accept the enemy's surrender or finish the job properly. Voss was advocating for complete annihilation, while Torres was suggesting they at least give the Thornax a chance to explain themselves before making them extinct. Morrison seemed to be calculating the cost-effectiveness of various genocide options. Sir, I said slowly, I believe we are witnessing what happens when you take a species that evolved by repeatedly trying to kill everything on their planet, give them spaceships, and then ask them politely to solve a military problem. The simulation timer read 59 minutes and 37 seconds. The 10-year Thornax war scenario was about to end in under an hour. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice was whispering that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy had been very lucky that humans had decided to be the good guys. The silence in the observation deck was deafening, not the peaceful kind of silence you might experience in a meditation chamber, but the horrified silence of beings who had just watched the fundamental laws of military strategy get violated in ways that would make a physics professor weep. The timer read 59 minutes and 53 seconds. "Sir," Seth whispered, his voice barely audible above the humming of the monitoring equipment. "The Thornax Collective is requesting terms of surrender." Admiral Kureth's tentacles had gone completely limp. I had seen this reaction only once before during the Great Academy fire of '87, when a Pyronian exchange student had accidentally melted the entire East Wing while trying to make tea. "Surrender?" Kureth repeated the word as if it were from an alien language, which, given the circumstances, it might as well have been. On the tactical display, the remaining Thornax forces had ceased all aggressive actions and were broadcasting surrender signals on every frequency simultaneously. The once mighty collective, which had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, was begging for mercy from 3 human cadets who had just treated their 10-year war scenario like a particularly annoying homework assignment. "Torres to command," came Maya's voice over the comm, sounding remarkably casual for someone who had just rewritten military history. "We've got some very apologetic space bugs here asking if we'd like to discuss peace terms. What's our policy on accepting surrender from genocidal insect empires?" Before anyone could respond, Voss's voice cut in with the kind of cheerful bloodthirst that made my species' ancestral prey instincts scream in harmony. "I say we finish what we started. You don't leave a job half done, and these things have been causing problems for everyone for way too long." "Aria." Morrison's voice carried the patient tone of someone used to talking his friends out of committing war crimes. "We can't just exterminate an entire species because they're inconvenient. Watch me. The Academy probably has rules about that. The Academy has rules about a lot of things, hasn't stopped us so far." I found myself frantically searching through the simulation protocols, looking for any clause that might address this situation. The Thornax war scenario had been designed as an educational tool, a way to teach future officers about the complexities of interstellar conflict. It had never been intended as a practical guide for actually defeating the Thornax Collective, because nobody had ever thought it was possible to actually defeat them this quickly. "Professor Velix," Admiral Kureth said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had just realized his entire career had been based on false assumptions. "What exactly are the victory conditions for this simulation?" I pulled up the original parameters, my claws clicking nervously against the control interface. "The scenario is considered complete when either the Thornax expansion is halted and contained, lasting peace is established, or," I paused, reading the fine print that nobody had ever expected to matter, "or the Thornax Collective is rendered completely unable to pose a future threat." And these humans have accomplished which condition? I looked at the tactical display where the Thornax homeworld was now sending continuous distress signals while their entire military structure collapsed around them like a house of cards in a hurricane. "All of them, sir, simultaneously." The communication channel crackled to life again as Torres apparently made an executive decision about the surrender offer. "Attention Thornax Command," she announced, her tone carrying the kind of professional courtesy usually reserved for customer service representatives dealing with particularly difficult complaints. "We accept your surrender under the following conditions: immediate cessation of all aggressive actions, complete demilitarization of your forces, and reparations to every species you've terrorized over the past 3 centuries. There was a brief pause before the Thornax response came through, translated by the universal communicators into what sounded like the insectoid equivalent of desperate sobbing. "We agree. We agree to all conditions. Please, no more singing." The singing. They were terrified of the human war songs. "Additionally," Torres continued, apparently just getting warmed up, "you will provide full technical specifications for all your weapon systems, surrender your territorial claims on contested worlds, and submit to ongoing inspections by a joint galactic peacekeeping force." "Yes, anything. Just please don't let the small angry one near our egg clusters." Voss's laughter echoed through the comm system, the kind of sound that probably featured in the nightmares of prey species across the galaxy. "Smart bugs," she said approvingly. "Well, I was really hoping someone would give me an excuse to test some of those new plasma charges Jake loaded for me." The timer hit exactly 60 minutes. 10 years of careful scenario planning, decades of accumulated military wisdom, Centuries of established tactical doctrine, all of it rendered obsolete in the span of a single hour, by 3 humans who had approached the problem with the kind of creative insanity that evolution had apparently hardwired into their species. "Sir," Zeph announced, his voice cracking slightly with disbelief, "the simulation is registering a complete victory, all objectives achieved. Total time 60 minutes, 0 seconds. Admiral Korath stared at the display for a long moment, his bioluminescent patches cycling through colors I had never seen before. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the tone of someone who had just watched their worldview get fed through a matter converter. "Summon them to the debriefing room," he said quietly. "I need to understand how this is possible." 20 minutes later, I found myself sitting across from the 3 humans in conference room 7, trying not to stare at them like they were exotic predators who had somehow learned to wear uniforms. Which upon reflection might not have been entirely inaccurate. Captain Torres looked exactly like her file photo's medium height, dark hair pulled back in regulation style, eyes that seemed to take in every detail of her surroundings with the casual efficiency of someone accustomed to making life or death decisions quickly. She sat with the relaxed confidence of a natural leader, completely unaware that she had just accomplished something that most military theorists had considered impossible. Lieutenant Morrison was taller and broader, with the kind of build that suggested he could probably wrestle a Gorthak and win. His uniform was slightly rumpled, and there were what appeared to be scorch marks on his sleeves. He kept glancing at the various pieces of monitoring equipment around the room, with the curious expression of someone wondering if he could take them apart to see how they worked. And then there was Sergeant Voss. Aria Voss was smaller than her companions, with short auburn hair and the kind of smile that made me instinctively want to check if my insurance policy covered acts of human warfare. She radiated the sort of cheerful energy that suggested she might spontaneously combust if forced to sit still for too long. Her eyes held a gleam that I recognized from my studies of apex predators, the look of something that had just discovered a new and interesting way to hunt. Admiral Korath entered the room with the measured pace of someone walking to their own execution. His tentacles were still twitching intermittently, and his color patterns had settled into what I recognized as the Vorthan equivalent of a migraine. "Cadets," he began, then stopped and started again. "No, that seems insufficient. Officers? Generals? Weapons of mass destruction?" "Just cadets is fine, sir," Torres said politely, "though I appreciate the promotion." Korath settled into his specialized chair, which creaked ominously under the weight of his existential crisis. "I need to understand something. The Thornax War scenario has been running for 10 years. 10 years. The most brilliant military minds in the galaxy have studied it, analyzed it, and attempted to solve it. The fastest anyone has ever completed it was 4 months and 3 days. "That seems really slow," Morrison commented. "Were they taking breaks, like really long breaks?" "You finished it in 1 hour. 59 minutes and 53 seconds, Voss corrected with the precision of someone who took pride in their work.
"Gee?"
"We were actually hoping to break the hour barrier, but Jake's supply run through the nebula took longer than expected. The nebula run saved us 3 weeks, Morrison protested. "And nobody died. Well, nobody on our side died." "The Maelstrom Nebula is classified as impassable," I interjected, unable to contain my scientific curiosity. "How did you navigate through gravitational anomalies that can tear apart molecular bonds?" Morrison shrugged. "Fast and lucky beats slow and careful every time. Plus I figured if the nebula wanted to kill us, it would have to catch us first." Admiral Korath's main eye swiveled between the 3 humans like a targeting system, trying to lock onto multiple threats simultaneously. "Let me understand your strategy. Instead of following established protocols, you convinced a xenophobic species to join your cause in 20 minutes, routed supplies through a region of space that violates several laws of physics, and then launched a direct assault on the most heavily defended system in the galaxy. When you put it like that, it sounds almost reckless," Torres said with a slight smile. "Almost?" Korath's voice climbed several octaves. "Well," Voss said, leaning forward with the enthusiasm of someone explaining their favorite hobby, "the key thing to understand is that everyone else was overthinking the problem. The Thornax were expanding because nobody was stopping them effectively. They were winning because their enemies were playing by rules that favored long, drawn-out conflicts. So we changed the rules," Morrison added. "Instead of fighting the war they wanted us to fight, we fought the war we wanted to fight, which was apparently a war involving relativistic kamikaze runs and weaponized stellar mechanics," I said weakly. "That neutron star thing was brilliant," Torres said, nodding approvingly at Voss. I never would have thought of using gravity as a tactical element. Everything's a weapon if you're creative enough, Voss replied cheerfully. Stars, nebulas, supply ships, war songs, existential dread. The universe is basically one giant armory if you look at it right. The room fell silent for a moment, as the implications of that statement settled in. I could practically hear the collective realization dawning among the Academy staff. We had just given weapons training to a species that considered the entire universe to be their personal arsenal. The war songs, Admiral Korath said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. What was the strategic purpose of the war songs? The three humans exchanged glances, and I caught something that looked almost like embarrassment flickering across their faces. Well, Torres said slowly, that wasn't actually planned as psychological warfare. We just really like singing when we fight, Morrison admitted. It keeps the mood up during combat. Plus it helps with timing, Voss added. Nothing like a good rhythm to coordinate weapons fire. Although I admit it was hilarious when the bugs started panicking about it. You accidentally created a terror weapon, I said, struggling to process this information. You traumatized an entire species with your recreational music. Is that bad? Voss asked. Because honestly, it worked really well. Admiral Korath stood up abruptly, his movement so sudden that everyone in the room reflexively tensed. For a moment I wondered if he was about to declare a galactic emergency and recommend that humans be classified as a prohibited weapons system. Instead, he began to laugh. It started as a low rumble, the kind of sound a Vorthan makes when processing something too absurd for normal comprehension. Then it built into something resembling actual laughter, though it sounded like it was being filtered through a broken translator and several layers of existential crisis. Do you understand, he said between fits of what I was now fairly certain was hysteria, that you three have just solved a problem that has kept military strategists awake at night for decades? The Thornax Collective has been the primary theoretical threat used in every major war college across the galaxy. Entire careers have been built on studying how to contain them. And Alf, Horace prompted. And you defeated them with the power of positive thinking, creative logistics, and show tunes? The humans looked at each other again, clearly trying to figure out if this was a compliment or an accusation. Sir, Zeph interrupted from the monitoring station. We're receiving a priority communication from Galactic Command. They're asking about the status of the simulation. The Admiral Korath's laughter cut off abruptly. What exactly are they asking? They want to know if our monitoring equipment is malfunctioning. Apparently the simulation's quantum resonance patterns are being detected by deep space sensors across 3 sectors. They're concerned that something might have gone wrong with the containment systems. The room went very, very quiet. Professor Velix, Admiral Korath said slowly, please tell me the simulation was properly isolated from real space quantum networks. I felt my respiratory sacs constrict as I checked and double-checked the containment protocols. The readings I was seeing shouldn't have been possible. Simulation data doesn't leak into real space. It can't leak into real space. The quantum isolation barriers were specifically designed to prevent exactly this kind of interference. Sarah, I said, my voice coming out as barely more than a squeak. I think we may have a problem. What kind of problem? Torres asked, and for the first time since I had met her, she sounded genuinely concerned. The kind of problem where your victory in the simulation might have accidentally transmitted tactical data to the actual Thornax Collective, I said, staring at readings that defied every principle of quantum mechanics I understood, and they appear to be responding to it. The communication panel lit up with incoming priority alerts from across the galaxy. Reports of Thornax forces suddenly retreating from contested systems, emergency broadcasts from frontier colonies describing insectoid ships fleeing at maximum speed toward their home territories, panicked transmissions from deep space monitoring stations tracking massive fleet movements in sectors that had been dormant for years. Are you telling us, Morrison said slowly, that we accidentally won a real war by winning a fake war? Before anyone could answer, the final communication came through a transmission from the actual Thornax Collective broadcasting on all standard diplomatic frequencies. To the humans of the Galactic Defense Academy, the translated voice chittered with what sounded like genuine terror. We formally request immediate negotiations for a permanent ceasefire. We will agree to any terms you consider reasonable. Please, just no more singing. Admiral Korath looked at the 3 human cadets who had just ended a real interstellar conflict by accident while completing their final exam. I think, he said weakly, We're going to need a bigger debriefing room. And in the distance, faintly audible through the station's hull, came the sound of Aria Voss laughing with the kind of joy that suggested she was already planning their next impossible victory. The galaxy, I realized, was never going to be the same.